Ready to start your ESG journey? Get going today with Social Suite, and you could start reporting publicly in 30 days. With investor pressure mounting and regulations just around the corner, there's never been a better time to start your ESG reporting. Social Suite takes the complexity out of environmental, social, and governance reporting. Social Suite helps organizations to measure, monitor, and report on their progress with fast, simple, and affordable software. Create value through ESG in order to raise capital, improve brand and reputation, as well as mitigate risk. Social Suite has helped almost 100 micro to small cap companies report on ESG, with some starting their baseline report in under 60 minutes and reporting publicly within 30 days. ESG is a lot easier than you think, and you're probably already doing it. So take your sustainability reporting to the next level with measurable progress. Start your ESG journey today with Social Suite, an ESG software company for micro to small caps. Visit socialsuitehq.com. That's social, SUITEHQ.com to learn more. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not provided as financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or an offer to buy or sell any securities or make any investment. The views expressed by guest speakers are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement thereof by SNN or its affiliates. SNN expressly disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast. My guest on the show today is Carol Craig, Chairwoman and CEO of Sidus Space, publicly traded company. The symbol is SIDU on NASDAQ. Sidus Space, located in Cape Canaveral, Florida, operates from a 35,000 square foot manufacturing, assembly, integration, and testing facility focused on commercial satellite design, manufacture, launch, and data collection. The company's heritage includes the design and manufacture of many flight and ground component parts and systems for various space-related customers and programs. Sidus Space has a broad range of space-as-a-service offerings, including space-rated hardware, manufacturing, design engineering, satellite manufacturing, and platform development, launch and support services, data analytics services, and satellite constellation management. Sidus Space has a mission of bringing space down to Earth and a vision of enabling spaceflight heritage status for new technologies while delivering data and predictive analytics to domestic and global customers. Okay, yes, there was at least one balloon joke during our conversation, maybe more. But in all seriousness, you know the common phrase, space is the final frontier. Carol and her team at Sidus Space are working towards opening that frontier for all, which we discuss in detail in our conversation, plus diving deeper into their business model, the difficulty in launching new satellites, the challenge of educating the population globally about space-based data, and where she envisions Sidus Space to be in 3 to 5 years and the inflection points that will get them there. With that, please enjoy my conversation with Carol Craig, Chairwoman and CEO of Sidus Space. Carol, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. I'm doing great.
All right. Well, this is a first for the show. Space as a service. That is completely new and out of this world, no pun intended. But I was really interested to learn more about what this means and basically commercial satellite production in general. I've done some interviews in the past with some meteor mining companies, just to give you a little background on some of my exposure to some of the entrepreneurial activities going on with space exploration. So, I say all that to start off, Carol. My first question for you is, what would you say is that one line that best describes Sidus Space?
So as you mentioned, Sidus Space is a space as a service company, and we provide multiple solutions and services across the entire space domain. And that includes mission critical hardware manufacturing for both space and defense, engineering, in-house satellite design, manufacture, in-orbit support, and then space-based data collection. So our model includes multiple lines of business that are complementary to each other and provide a full solution in the space domain.
Absolutely. So on the company's investor presentation, I like how you introduce yourself as an astropreneur. So assuming you were the founder of the company, which I believe you are, tell us a little bit about the origin story. What was the original thesis for founding and then now getting to where you are today?
Sure. Well, and like you mentioned, I'm the founder of Sidus Space, and while Sidus Space is new to public markets, we aren't new to space and aerospace. And so Sidus has over a decade of experience manufacturing space and defense hardware, as I mentioned. And as CEO, I have over 30 years of experience in aerospace, aviation, traditional space, and commercial space. And so Sidus Space actually began operations in 2012 as a spinoff from my first company, really focused on manufacturing. And the area that we were most focused on was traditional space, so NASA and defense type of agencies and requirements. And as the entire industry started to shift toward commercial space, even traditional space realized that there might be a better model. We also shifted that direction. And one of the things that we produced was a flight test platform that we launched to the International Space Station. We're able to test a number of different types of technologies and materials in that external environment of space. And then we also took over an on-orbit satellite deployer that was up also on the International Space Station. So again, it moved from this traditional manufacturing as a spinoff to really grow with the space ecosystem and move more into commercial space.
So now we're here, 2023. The company just raised another bit of capital that you announced the other. We're recording this on Tuesday, February 7th, 2023. Catch us up. Where does the company stand currently as it exists today? Are we commercially available? Sales, the whole bit.
Right. Well, we're still moving, executing on original plan, and I'll talk a little bit about what our focus was. So we manufacturing, but it's really the satellite constellation that we're focused on. And our mission, what we say, is bringing space down to Earth. It's reimagining space access. And so what we're trying to solve is, again, that lack of access to the space ecosystem at a low cost. Really, that's the challenge, right? It's a little more complicated to either test a technology in space or even reap the benefits of space-based data. And what we're doing is trying to kind of a market correction to make that available to anybody and everybody. And so we are moving toward that, executing on that. And what makes that possible is our LizzieSat satellite and our planned fleet of small satellites, and that will provide Earth observation and remote sensing solutions to customers. And we actually call it a multi-mission satellite for a multi-mission constellation, because it isn't just about one industry or one type of customer. It's a flexible mission type of a satellite, and I can talk a little bit more in a bit about the size and what makes it different. But at the end of the day, it's data that most of our customers are looking for. And I think that really is the future of the space ecosystem, is providing that type of, even almost like a software as a service solution to customers, no matter who they are.
Very good. All right. So there is like 1,000 different rabbit holes I now want to go down based on that last answer. But I'm going to start with this because I think it's important to maybe take a step back to give a background here, because you mentioned something about how, you're basically space as a service, that your mission really is to provide access to the space ecosystem. So I want to better understand what do you mean by that?
I mean, let's just take an example of let's just go to the consumer level. So, or an organization, like an environmental organization that's looking to provide a solution to, climate change. And maybe it's in a small area, just like even the Florida Keys, where you've got these nonprofit organizations that are trying to determine whether or not there's damage to coral caused by cruise ships. That's the most basic, kind of a lower level. Well, they don't have access to that type of data, either easily or economically, that could provide them some sort of solution. And so that's really what we're looking to do, is to be able to build a constellation that's focused on, down to the level of the consumer. Because that, as you follow space, and in the past, a lot of the satellites have been really large satellites, extremely expensive. They're focused on military and defense. And so if there is a solution that's needed out there, it isn't easy to change whatever the focus is for a particular satellite. And I think that's with the LEO, the lower Earth orbit satellites, that's what we're looking to do, is provide solutions to the everyday person, and that access, and make it more commonplace.
So let's touch on that then, because that's really interesting. I mean, how does the company evaluate potential partners to work with? Because I would assume that, hey, there's a lot of crazies out there too, right? That would be like, oh, I would love to get a Sidus Space satellite for all my crazy ideas and confirm conspiracy, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, sure, I'm going to the extreme, but like, that's the consumer sometimes, right? So how do you think about, who that target customer is? And is it really more of a partnership versus of like, yeah, no, go on our website, buy we'll work with you.
Yeah, it's a little more structured. Again, having been in business for the last 10 years and a lot of government customers, defense, NASA, and everybody, you've kind of already got a pipeline of customers that are looking for our previous solutions. But then also, as we've moved towards satellite manufacturing and our own constellation, they're also moving with us and recognizing, okay, this is another offering that an already established supplier can provide to us. So I think that's important. We don't get a whole lot of the crazies yet. And when it comes to the data,
no, just kidding.
yeah. Well, you don't think so. We want to help everybody, right?
I'm just messing. Yeah.
So I think when it comes to the data, though, that's one area that is not yet fully mature, I think, across the entire, well, not the space ecosystem, but in general, just across globally, right? So I think that's something where part of our challenge, and I say our, when I say our, I mean the space ecosystem and all of us who are a part of that challenge is educating the population, globally on all the opportunities that are available with space data. So, like in the early days of the internet, nobody thought about communications and education and businesses that could be revolutionized, right? And that new businesses would emerge. And I think that's what we're looking at when it comes to space-based data. And the industry globally, every other non-traditional industries don't yet understand what these benefits are that can be derived from this data. So I say all of that, meaning that is the future, and that is where most of us are moving, and that's that offering that we really believe is just going to, take off, just like the rest of the space ecosystem, at that, point of inception.
Absolutely. So, okay. So to give you a little background, one of our other shows that we have within our podcast network, Compounders, we actually did an interview with Viasat, multi-billion-dollar company. They big satellite manufacturer as well, and their satellites provide a number of capabilities, right? So are we really talking about, when it comes to Sidus Space, satellites that have more or less, I don't want to say limited, but a specific type of capability in order to make it commercially available? Or is it kind of, I'm sure you do custom as well, so I'd love to learn more.
Right. It's more functional. So if you again think about the evolution of satellites, like I said, Viasat, a lot of there's larger satellites, and then the pendulum swung to CubeSats. So you have the smaller satellites, which are less expensive, but they also have less functionality because they're smaller. And typically they're focused on one industry, one type of sensor. They do one thing. Well, that's not the case with our satellite. Our satellite is 100 kilograms, which is about 220 pounds, the size of a coffee table. It has redundant systems, which actually means that it's more reliable. We're designing with a 5-year design life to stay on orbit for a specific amount of time. We may not need it to stay on that long based on technological obsolescence. But what really makes it different is that we are able to integrate multiple sensors into a single satellite. So whether that is a traditional camera, or a hyperspectral or a multispectral camera, which gives you a different picture and really more detail into a certain area or image, or an identifier type of sensor. It might be infrared. There's all kinds of sensors out there, and we're able to integrate multiple sensors into a single satellite. And what that does is it increases the revenue, certainly, out of a single satellite. And it increases the number of customers that can benefit from that satellite, whether it's a customer who's looking to test a technology. And maybe it's a customer who wants to be a part of the space ecosystem. So they've got a camera, maybe it's a software-defined radio that they want to test. They can come to us. We can integrate that into our satellite as one of those technologies or revenue streams, and then provide them with data to say, hey, it worked. Another customer may come to us and say, I was thinking about launching my own satellite constellation. And then all of a sudden I realized, wow, this is not that easy, especially with the launch, the launch providers being limited and all the other factors that go into it. And they'll come to us and say, can I integrate my sensor into your satellite and therefore your constellation, and then receive that data, subscription as a basis, subscription as a service basis over a length of time. And then a third model is actually, and part of what we do with our space on our satellite, is integrate our own selected sensors. And so that's a pure data revenue service that we're providing to customers that don't even care how they get that data. They don't care what satellite it's on. They don't care any of that kind of stuff. They just say, hey, I'm trying to track maritime logistics and I'd like the GPS points and maybe an image that goes along with it. Can you provide that to me? And that's pure data, like a software as a service. And so it's all those types of offerings. So it doesn't have to be a big satellite to be able to be functional for multiple missions and multiple customers.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate that overview there. Because I had Viasat in my head. I was like, wow, big satellites, all this. Yeah. But another question that I have though too, and I'm sure you get this all the time when you're talking with investors and stuff like that. When it comes to regulation, what does that even mean? In terms of when you have a satellite up there and it's going in orbit, and I apologize, I'm not an astrophysicist by any means, so if I get one of these words wrong, I apologize, also to any astrophysicists listening out there. But what is, you launch a new satellite, or you have a customer that wants to launch a new satellite, like what are some of the regulatory just issues or what's involved? Like, sure. I just want to better understand.
So first of all, there's something called spectrum. Spectrum license is what allows an operator, a satellite, to transmit and receive from space RF frequencies, right? And so the FCC is the US-based organization that monitors spectrum. And then there's something called the ITU, which is the International Telecommunications Union, which is the global side of it, that monitors the transmission in that spectrum. And it's to avoid, as you can imagine, interfering with things that shouldn't be interfered with. So first of all, you have to
last thing we need is like a World War III because it flew over North Korea or something.
Maybe so, or it interfered with whatever. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. I mean, defense has, they've got their mission and they need to make sure that that's not disturbed. And so that's one regulation that you have to have if you're going to be transmitting, data up and down and communications. Another would be NOAA. So for any type of imagery that's Earth observation, and as a US company, certainly you have to have a NOAA license to be able to point a camera toward the Earth. And that's another. So these are kind of some standard steps that you go through. There's also now FCC is looking at the orbital debris and how they can, and all of us need to be aware of that. One of the advantages of our larger satellite is that we are able to manipulate our satellite so we can deorbit if we want to. CubeSats are small. You can't necessarily have propulsion or multiple reaction wheels to deorbit. We have that. But the FCC is looking at that and putting requirements on certain satellites to say you have to be able to deorbit, or that life of satellite needs to be 5 years or less. There's things like that are in when you think about regulations. And so that's what a satellite operator has to understand. And then once you've got satellites on orbit, you need a mission operations center to actually monitor the satellites, the health and welfare of the satellites, like I mentioned, to be able to deorbit, and then certainly to be able to pull data down. So, it is much larger than just launch a satellite and hope for the best kind of a thing. So then that's what we offer. That when I say those services, we offer all of that. And even our Mission Operations Center, we've talked to other satellite operators and said, if you need that extension, or some of the startups that are looking to have a satellite constellation, they don't necessarily have to stand up a Mission Operations Center because we've already got that in place. So much more economical to share and work together.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the total addressable market for your target customer. I don't want to hear the space, the trillion opportunity, but like for your specific target customer.
Well, that's kind of my answer, though. It is the trillion, right? So I say that because even that number, that total addressable market, you need to kind of say, well, where's that coming from? And what are the economic multipliers? And I go back to the internet example, right? We really don't know. But in our case, we do look at not just, if you break out the total addressable markets or the industries that are interested in space, we don't look at just one. We don't look at just maritime. We don't look at just Department of Defense. We don't look at just NASA. It's really across the board. So I think it's difficult to say, what it really is, the entire total addressable market. Other numbers that people will throw out when they talk about the market, and more of the launch providers, they'll say that, there's, in the next 10 years, they're estimating there's going to be 18,000 satellites, in the next, 20, 30 years, 40,000 satellites up there. And again, even that's kind of, I wouldn't say it's questionable, but ultimately what we're looking at is to minimize the number of satellites. Why would there be that many satellites? Because people want data. They either want, you've got telecom and you've got Earth observation, space weather, space observation types. And so if they being customers can ultimately get the data they want without having to have the infrastructure, without having to put all those satellites, wouldn't that be the best solution? And so I think that the total addressable market, again, I don't think we even have any idea how big it is, but I also think that there's going to be a little bit of a, you're going to start to see, the edges won't be so blurry around kind of number of satellites. I think it'll get to where it's a nice infrastructure number that's then going to support, the rest of the industry and those burgeoning businesses.
I should have rephrased it. I'll rephrase the question then this way as well. What industries right now would you say is Sidus Space really digging into right now?
So we use an example. Well, I've got a couple. So one, I will say we're focused on what I've described as underrepresented international countries. And those are the countries that have these small space budgets. It's not UK, although we work with, a number of those other ones as well, but there's a lot of smaller ones that they want to be a part of space. They understand the benefits from space, but they just don't have the large budgets. And so our manufacturing or engineering or satellites, all of our capabilities can assist those countries and then those industry partners within those countries to be able to participate in the ecosystem and then also benefit. So that's one area we're focused on. If you break it down into, I mentioned like maritime, there's weather, there's agriculture. I think agriculture is one industry that can really benefit from our types of satellites that have the multiple sensors, whether it's the hyperspectral or the multispectral cameras and others, because there are a lot of use cases within agriculture that can really have benefits all the way to the commodities market. So for example, to be able to determine water content in the soil for the farmers so they know whether they need to, and it could be more than water, fertilize or irrigate or whatever, just to have their crops succeed, actually flows into the commodities markets. So now they understand. We're able to really trend and monitor and provide solutions so that, agriculture is a global type of a, I wouldn't say problem, but a challenge. If you look at the UN sustainable goals and focused on, food and other things like that. So that's just one example, but there's so many. And all of those customers can benefit from the data that we're capturing, especially when I talk about imagery and those different types of imagery, because we're capturing the entire time that we're circling the globe. So as you can imagine, we're covering a number of different areas, a number of different customers, and capturing this data and able to sell that to multiple industries.
For sure. I'm like looking up, like you're looking at me right now.
Chinese balloon.
Yeah, right. But another question I have for you, and I'm sure you get this asked a lot. How many satellites to date has Sidus Space actually launched into space?
I appreciate that. We have not launched our 3D hybrid LizzieSat satellite. We have manufactured flight hardware. We manufactured hardware for the Artemis 1 rocket that was launched, SLS rocket that had the Orion that went around the moon. So we have extensive experience manufacturing hardware for other satellites, assembly and testing. But this is the first time where we're actually manufacturing for our own product, and same process applies, just like it did with all of our other products that we've manufactured for others. We follow the same standards with a little more flexibility and a focus on that commercial solution.
For sure. What would you say is the company's real differentiator? You can make the argument like, oh, well, if this becomes a real market, will Viasat, for example, not saying anything, but like, will Viasat eventually start going to commercial and helping others to produce satellites and launch them? I know you have many other aspects of the business. I don't mean to make it like that, but what would you say is the primary differentiator between some of your competition out there that are also trying to accomplish similar goals?
Well, I don't even use the word competition. I say competimates, because none of us have the same business model. We really are complementary. Whether you look at Spire, or you look at Black Sky, and look at some of the others, we're all doing things somewhat similar, but we've got a different take on it. So I go back to the differentiator I think it's the diversity. First of all, it's the diversity of our company. So we've got kind of that large company model where we're providing a number of different type of solutions across the board, different divisions that can support our customers in a number of ways, not just a single niche or focused company. But then that diversity then translates, you move the diversity toward, as I mentioned, the multi-mission satellite, a flexible mission satellite that isn't just focused on one area. And then we're lean. I've been in business for 25, 30 years, feels like it's even more than that. And so when you run your own company, you understand how to be conservative, you understand how to have that long-term strategy. And we were also conservative even when we went public. We went public via IPO, vice the SPAC, because that's a little, kind of, we're doing things very methodically and structured. And I think that's a little bit different as well. We've been in business for a long time. We understand space. And so that's another differentiator. But I go back to it's competimates. Those that are in the industry right now, I think, will be there and will work together. And there's a lot of change in the industry. I think you've seen some pivots, whether it's a Terra and Orbital now focused more on the government side of things, or consolidations and things like that. But ultimately, we all have our strengths, and I think that's what makes up the space ecosystem.
Absolutely. So another question I have for you, like you said, the company's been public, since 2021, right? You've done some of the dog and pony show now, right? Done a few of the conferences and all that good stuff. A lot. You've met with investors. What's been some of the more frequently asked questions that you get, or what are they still potentially confused about when thinking about Sidus Space? Maybe we can address that today.
Sure. So there's a couple of different things. I think one is that, and this is nothing against them. The space ecosystem is new, and it's just growing, and we've been, living and breathing it for the last 30 some years, but this is new to a lot of people. So some of the things that it may be confusing would be understanding the lead times involved in launching a satellite, and that there are factors out of our control when it comes to launching. And some of that, if you look at it, could be the limited number of launch providers, but really it's things like weather. There's all kinds of other types of factors that you can only mitigate so much. And so it's an education thing, helping our investors and helping, the industry and globally understand that it takes time. And that really there needs to be some flexibility there. Now, it isn't, okay, it should take 20 years. It really is. We may move to a few months to the right, or maybe there's something that you're going to pivot a little bit and make a change because you've got a different type of customer, and it makes sense to add this into a satellite, things like that. So I think that's just one of the difficulties, is really helping educate a brand new industry and what's involved there. I think another challenge that we have is being able to share information with our investors. I wish I could share everything. I'm very much a transparent person, and I want everyone to know what we're doing. But with a lot of our customers, we're not able to do. We're not able to put out as much press as we would like, even related to customers that we locked in on and that we're working with. And so that becomes sometimes the challenge. What we try to do is put out as much information as we can, even about the progress on certain satellites or technologies, and hope that, that gives the investors confidence that we're executing on our plan. And then probably, like I mentioned before, I think it's, the education, that understanding what space-based data can truly do for industry on Earth, helping the investors see, what the possibility is, and think about the future, and investing now in a company like ours that's a space infrastructure. It's that pick and shovel kind of a model. Where's that going to be, and understanding that the rest of the world's going to come along pretty quickly and see. And there was an article in a Harvard Business Review. I think it was called "Your Company Needs a Space Strategy Now." We saw that and we're like, this is great, because this is when the rest of the world and the other industries realize, like, wow, space truly is becoming, an important source of value for businesses across diverse sectors, those non-traditional sectors that never thought that space would be something that could, help them.
Without question. And, I something you said there made a lot of sense to me, is that, developing the space ecosystem, I think everybody who's listening and watching this would all agree, like that, we always say it's the final frontier, but like, it's really the case, right? Yeah. And it sounds like more so than anything, the number one, not critique, I guess you'd say, but the concern, I guess maybe you get from an investor audience is just, okay, how do I understand timing around this? Like, is this a tech issue that we're now waiting, that we got to wait for this to really take off? Or is this more of just a market education thing? Or is it both?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And I believe it's a market education. I believe the technology is there. And that's what we're seeing. That's another thing we like about our satellite and the way we've designed it, is that it's flexible and it can move with the technology. So we aren't putting up, 20 satellites that have this one particular technology and having them up there, and they have to stay up there and that's it, right? We're able to integrate in various points throughout as we're building our satellites, so we can move and be more flexible even with the technology. So I don't know that it's technology. I think it really is the market understanding. And it's taken a little bit longer if you look backwards, but I think at this point, there's so much understanding about space. And I think a lot of that has come from the tourism side of it, which is 1% of the overall, space ecosystem and the addressable market. But I think it's really highlighted for everybody that, yeah, this is coming. It's not if, but when. And now it's just a matter of helping them understand how it applies to them.
Carol, in your opinion, what would you argue is good? It will potentially could be that tipping point in market education here.
I think it's really, well, certainly the more satellites that are on orbit, the more you'll see that. But I think it's what we need to see, and what we are doing is a well thought out plan and a strategic plan. So, and what I mean by that is, for example, we've already locked in or contracted with SpaceX for several launches, kind of looking forward. I think what's happened in the past, a lot of companies are building satellites and doing this technology and going, okay, I'm here now, let me go see where I can get a ride. And what needs to happen is a more steady flow launch cadence, where you can kind of see consistency, because that's what's really going to show the value of that space-based data, or the value of space, is it's not kind of smaller one-offs that are being launched by different types of companies. And that's just a matter of time. And that's just really kind of, maturity, maybe even in the industry. But I think that's what's going to do it. I also see, you have little pop-ups. You just see, as the non-traditional industries recognize the value, John Deere recognize the value of satellite comms, related to their equipment and tracking and communication and things like that. And so they even put out a request for proposals to space companies to come back and provide them with solutions. So when you see something like that, you go, oh yeah, this is the tide is turning. And then once it turns, it's gonna go very rapidly.
Very good. All right. Another question that I have for you, and I asked this to everybody on here. So, we want to play little devil's advocate on, look, hey, space exploration, space, it's all very exciting. But at the end of the day, when we're looking at Sidus Space, in your opinion, what would you say are some of the company's downside risks that folks should be aware of? Sure. So
Certainly public company, the market right now is a little challenging right now. And you saw we raised capital. The being public, the ability to raise capital is important, and it's important for taking advantage of opportunities. And so, and you want to be able, and also to be able for CapEx, if it looks like, there's more opportunity out there, you want to be able to build more satellites, look at acquisitions and things like that. So I think that's one of the challenges that we have, is the market. But what that means is you just have to make sure that you're closely following the trends, whether it's market or it's industry, making sure to be flexible, mitigate risk as you can, but then also take advantage of opportunity, and be very tightly controlled when it comes to lead times. we all talk about supply chain challenges, and they're there not only for in manufacturing and satellite components and things, but also in the launch side of things. I think that's really where those are. One of the areas we talk about launch, and I mentioned that we had contracted with SpaceX. That's another risk, is that there won't be enough launch providers, but we're very much involved with the startup, and they're not even startups as much anymore, small rocket launchers, and looking ahead in the future right now and locking in on contracts with them to make sure that we have that strategy going forward. So, we're mitigating those risks, but those are some of the things that we have to be aware of and ensure that, we're ahead of the game. Very good.
Now, another question that I have for you, going through the company deck and looking at financials and stuff, what would you say is the company's path to profitability?
Sure, and that's important to investors, and it really does tie to satellites. When we've talked about the majority of our revenue to date has been manufacturing, and not insignificant. And some of the projects that we're on, not only, as I mentioned, Artemis 1, but also the Mobile Launcher 2 for the follow-on. And we've got some significant work there, and we're supporting a lot of great programs. But the higher margin type of revenue is centered around our satellites. And so that's the path to profitability. It is the acceleration of production of satellites. It's the on orbit and then getting that steady production cadence. And so that's what we look for. And as mentioned, we've got varying types of revenue per satellite. So you're able to recognize revenue as you're building your satellite for those customers who are looking, for that ride to space or that initial data. And then the ultimate is the on-orbit data space-based collection that's then being sold to multiple industries and multiple customers. So that's really the path. And it's a short-term path. It isn't. We've been in business for a long time. We didn't have to spend years building up the manufacturing or setting up and that kind of thing. So our path is maybe shorter than even some of those startups that are, in the same kind of time frame or went public, when we did, or things like that. So I think it's a shorter path, but it certainly ties to that acceleration of production.
Absolutely. So one other question regarding the satellite that you're currently trying to get together and then launch in space. One thing I just thought about, from a business perspective, how do you weigh the decision to launch when you're like, oh, we could probably add a couple more sensors here with this company, or we could probably add a few more sensors, or do we just need to get this thing up? How do you think about that?
That's a great question. And really our model is that we're not dependent on filling that space with customers, like you mentioned, and that by the nature of what we do, there's a cutoff. There's testing, assembly testing, integration, all of that you have to do prior to launching. So you can't keep adding payloads at the end of the production cycle. So just by its nature, you got a cutoff point. But also our model is that, like I mentioned, we have our own sensors and technologies. That's our pure data play. So having that in there combined with the other payload providers allows us to not have to make that big change and all of a sudden tell somebody that we're not going to launch when we had planned on. I mean, any changes to launch are usually due to the launch providers, and again, weather, or if it's a secondary payload, it might be a primary payload on SpaceX or somebody that might change and slide, but that's typically a small amount.
I just have this image in my head of 10 seconds before you're about to launch, and one of your salespeople wait. I just about to sign this deal. Do not launch.
Yeah. Wait. No. Well, and the fact that we have contracted with SpaceX and we know when our launches are and we know what our production cycle is, that allows us, if already it's too late and we've closed off one, we can say, well, here's the next launch. I mean, that's really important. Yeah. A timeline for customers. And that's what we did the end of this past year, and then just recently was lock in on those launches, and now we can really go out to our entire pipeline that we've been building of customers and finalize and convert those contracts to say, hey, here's when we're going to launch, and here's when we can get you on, and now for sure you've got a ride to space.
Got it. All right, my final question for you here today to close us out. Again, from what you can tell us, where would you like to see the company be in 3 to 5 years? And what would you say are the inflection points that'll get you there?
So certainly 3 to 5 years, we want to have our significant satellite fleet on orbit and growing all of our capabilities as well. We envision that the landscape will continue to change when it comes to technology. So more technology integration, potential acquisitions, the growth is planned. I mean, I think that, that inflection point really is the multiple satellites over the next 24 months. I mean, that's when we see that the company really demonstrates the value of the data. It's not demonstrating that we can do what we say we're going to do. It's really demonstrating to the rest of the world and all these other non-traditional industries that this data, whether it's infrared or it's an image or it's a identifier for maritime, whatever it might be, it can apply to them, to those industries, to those companies, and really change the way that they do business.
Absolutely. Well, with that, Carol, where can our audience go and find more information on Sidus Space?
You can go to our website at Sidus Space, altogether, 2 S's in the middle, .com.
Carol, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. Good luck. Stay safe. And I look forward to our next update.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Appreciate it.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not provided as financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or an offer to buy or sell any securities or make any investment. The views expressed by guest speakers are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement thereof by SNN or its affiliates. SNN expressly disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information presented in this podcast.